back to the Podcast Hangout, and today we're going to be comparing two of the most influential sci-fi series ever, Dune and Star Wars. And when I say Dune, I am mostly going to be talking about the 2021 and 2024 adaptation of Frank Herbert's 1965 novel, but I will circle back to his novel when I'm talking about release dates and such like that. So, just to recap, I guess for you, I recently watched the first two Dune movies in the newest reboot of the Dune series, and I thought they were actually really good. I loved, the visuals. I read a little bit of the original Dune book, so I had a little bit to go off of, but I was kind of just going into the deep end here. And yeah, the story is great, the acting was great, everything was amazing. But I did notice some similarities to another beloved sci-fi franchise that I happen to enjoy. I don't know if you can see my shirt. Star Wars. And I do acknowledge that Star Wars came after Dune. So we're just going to be comparing the two series, looking at some similarities and then differences in those similarities. And then we're going to look at overall differences, and then we're going to look at the messages almost behind it. We'll maybe talk about some of the other stuff, and then I want to end with the impact on the sci-fi genre as a whole. And yeah, it'll be a great time. So first, the similarities. Now, apart from it being set in a galactic setting, there are three major similarities between the two that I will touch on. So the first one is the planets of Dune versus Tatooine, the Voice versus the Force, and Spice versus Spice. That last one is a bit more obvious than the others. First of all, Dune and Tatooine. Like I said before, Dune originally came out in '65, so anything that Star Wars is similar to Dune, it would most likely be George Lucas was inspired by Dune. But, so, Dune versus Tatooine. Both are very desert-based planets, which is a very, it's very, I don't know how you describe it, but it's a very obvious thing where George Lucas got Tatooine from. But, again, when we're looking at the visuals of the two planets are slightly different, especially in the newer Dune movie. It's more of a reddish sand compared to the yellowish sand of Tatooine. I believe both were filmed in actual desert places. I know for a fact Tatooine was filmed in Tunisia, though. So, I mean, I don't know if Dune was filmed in Tunisia. But the main reason Dune is wanted by everyone is that it has spice, which we'll talk on later. So, it's a spice harvesting planet. Meanwhile, Tatooine is wanted by literally nobody, and they harvest moisture. So it's a bit different, the industries on these planets. And then the population with Dune, there's said to be about 1 million or so Fremen, which are the native people of Dune, and Tatooine has about 250,000 people on it. So not a lot. And I believe Tatooine has about 0.9% surface area of it is water, so there is a bit more water on Tatooine than Dune, as we saw in Book of Boba Fett. But again, we're mainly going to be talking about the original trilogy and maybe the prequels here, because anything that came after that is probably not going to be inspired by Dune. So yeah, some very striking similarities there. Next, we'll talk about the Voice versus the Force. Next, I'm going to be talking about the Voice versus the Force, like I said. So, in Dune, there's this spiritual thing used by the Bene Gesserit, which, to me, the best way to describe them are, the Night Sisters. So, there's another thing that you could be like, oh, they took it from that. But, the Voice is something used by the Bene Gesserit and the main character of Dune, Paul Atreides. And it basically is a tool or a power that they have where they can use the power of their voice to command someone to do something. My favorite example is in Dune 2. I should have prefaced this, but spoilers. My favorite, like I said, Dune 2, where after the big climactic duel in the Emperor's Palace or whatever, Paul uses the voice on everybody in the room to like shut up, and it like physically pushes them back. But the Force is very similarly named, a one-syllable word preceded by the, or before, after the, so the voice, the Force. But the Force, the first time we hear of the Force, it's a much different thing than the voice. From what I can tell, the voice is only a physical tool, and the Force is, like Obi-Wan says, it surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. So it's more of like a living, breathing entity almost, and when people die, they become one with the Force. But it's also in that very same movie, Obi-Wan uses it as like a Jedi mind trick. So he's basically commanding people to do that using the Force and using his voice, which is pretty similar. But over time, the Force has become its own thing. Like I said, it's a living entity. There's many more Force powers than there are voice powers, from my understanding. Again, I've only seen the Dune movie, so if there's any more powers in the book, please correct me in the comments if YouTube allows comments on this video. But there's stuff like Force Lightning, which is like only used by the Sith. Again, the Force is also split into two different beings, being the Jedi and the Sith. But the Sith use Force Lightning, the Jedi can use Force Judgment, which is like a weaker version of Force Lightning. There's the ability to like sense the past of certain items or areas that we see Cal Kestis use. And yeah, there's just a lot more to do with the Force than the voice, but it's definitely similar, and I think I know where George Lucas got that idea. But like I said, it's slowly become its own thing over time, which I will probably say a lot more, because that is what Star Wars has done. The next similarity is spice versus spice, and I don't really have a defense on Star Wars for this one. Spice in Dune is used for space travel, and as a drug almost for the Fremen to like do whatever they do with it, and then spice in Star Wars is only a drug, so it's different. But in Dune, it like I said, it's used as for space navigation, which we will also talk about in the differences category. But I mean, George Lucas just taking the word spice, it being a drug, it's it being worth millions in Star Wars as well. It's a very convenient thing, you could say, almost. I mean, spice is found on Kessel, not Tatooine, which I guess is a saving grace of it, but that's all I can really give spice. But after this, we're going to be talking about the differences of the two. So, differences. The biggest difference to me is the combat. In Star Wars, combat is a lot of ranged weaponry. Blasters are a very common thing, and only the Jedi and Sith really use lightsabers. Meanwhile, in Dune, there's a lot less projectiles. It's a lot of melee combat. It's literally knives and swords and stuff. Which, there is good reason. There's these, like, energy shields that the people of the Dune universe wear that protect them from anything that is moving too fast. So when you're dueling somebody, you have to, like, slow and control your way through that shield. But the reason, like, laser beams aren't a thing then is because if it combines with the shield, like a laser bolt hits the shield, there'll be, like, a nuclear explosion, which, it's kind of crazy. But, so, the combat really is, I mean, space combat is a little similar. I mean, there's surface-to-air projectiles, but even ships have these certain shields. So what's really cool about the projectiles in Dune is that they're physical, like, bullets almost, that, like, drill their way through the shield, and then once they connect with solid metal, they explode, which, like I said, is pretty cool. I think I'm just going to do the differences in one take here. Next difference is space travel. In Star Wars, when you want to jump from planet to planet, you go through hyperspace, which is, at its core, a whole nother dimension that transcends, like, time and space or something. It's pretty complicated, and in Dune, it's just basically like Star Trek, like wormholes. I actually don't know if that's what Star Trek is. but it makes a little bit more sense. And spice is used because it like jump boosts the navigators' brains to like calculate these jumps at very fast speeds, because droids and thinking robots and stuff, they've been cast aside. They're like illegal or something, which is another big difference between the Star Wars universe and Dune. And the biggest difference is plot. The plot of Dune is really just about overthrowing the oppression on one planet, and it just follows Paul through his journey as becoming a Fremen and becoming one of them, which is similar to Luke training to be a Jedi, but Star Wars over time has just become good versus evil, and like even the original trilogy is so much different than Dune in the way that they are throwing over the Empire, but they do it in such like different ways and different strategies, and it's a lot less like there's a lot more time focused on the religious aspect of Dune versus Star Wars. There's a lot more time focused on the training in Dune than I think there is training in Star Wars. Like, Empire Strikes Back is the most Jedi training we see in the original trilogy, and that's about it. Meanwhile, Dune, the entire first act of Dune Part 2, I would say, is Paul learning to become a Fremen, which is a big shift, and I can see why Dune Part 2 is nearly 3 hours long, but it just comes to, like, the plots are just so different, and it's because, like, the messages sent by the authors and the creators are different. Like, it was, Dune was originally, like, a commentary on wars in the Middle East over oil, because it's all over this one precious natural resource. Meanwhile, Star Wars is more of, like, a combat against... It's not, like, Star Wars at its core was like, a commentary about fascism, but it's just grown over time to be more of a story about working together, friendship, family, and hope. Meanwhile, Dune is a story of oppression and natural resource and how corrupt religion can change everything, which Dune is a very, very religious thing in contrast to Star Wars' war-based thing. A lot of, like, even books on Star Wars are about the war, and like I said, Dune is it's honestly at its core a very sad story about how religion can just shape one culture even if it didn't start there, much like religions in our world that are just exported to other cultures because someone feels the need that they know more than what these people already think. And that's just what Dune is a story of. Like, I don't know what else to say. So, a bit of a rant there, but it was definitely more controlled. And yeah, now we'll talk about the music, I think, because that's a big talking point for me. So, the music. We'll start with Dune. So, anything related to cinematography and a movie that Dune has done would be inspired by Star Wars. Star Wars, the movie, came out before even the first Dune movie. Dune made a movie in, I believe, 1984, and the first Star Wars movie came out in 1977, and the trilogy ended in 1983. So anything movie-related would be an inspiration to Star Wars, whereas anything plot-related would be an inspiration from Dune. So it's this really cool cycle that they can just keep like being inspired by the advancements by each of the franchises. But Dune's music isn't anything like that. Hans Zimmer did not take any tips, you could say, from John Williams. It is such a different style of music from what we come to expect from major Hollywood / even just sci-fi, because after Star Wars, you expect swelling orchestras, these amazing brass sections, these like mystical string sections or whatever. And in Dune, it's a lot slower, a lot more controlled, a lot of percussion. There's this, like a flute or some sort of woodwind that like flares out, and then there's like these really, really great vocals, and I think the vocals are semi-inspired by like Middle Eastern languages from what I can understand, and which just goes back to Dune at its core being a commentary on the wars in the Middle East. But the music is just so wonderful. And then, I mean, obviously, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the music of Star Wars, because honestly, it could be its own video. But the music of Star Wars is more, grand, because that's what Star Wars is. It's a grand battle for the entire galaxy. Meanwhile, Dune is a more controlled about one single civilization, which what the music is focusing on. It's more of a Fremen-based music, I think, which is perfect for what the story is. And if you haven't heard, or you don't know what I'm talking about with Dune, I believe there is this one song called Paul Atreides. Look it up on wherever you get your music, and just listen for that flute, for those vocals. Just listen to the Dune soundtrack. I mean, it's honestly, it's so exciting, and yeah, the music is just so different, and I was really not expecting that from Dune. So, props to Hans Zimmer. I'm a really big John Williams fan, and I don't care for much other than John Williams, but Hans Zimmer really knocked it out of the park with Dune. Now I will talk about the impact on the sci-fi genre. So, Dune came out in 65. It is a very early in terms of sci-fi, if you ask me. I think Star Wars is the turning point in sci-fi, and that's the beginning of the modern sci-fi era, if you ask me. But Dune came out, and it was really one of the only sci-fi projects out at the time, other than the Star Trek original series, which came out early and like 63, I think, and went to 65. And then the only thing in that decade other than Dune and Star Trek would be 2001: Space Odyssey. That's like the only notable sci-fi thing that came out in that decade. If I'm wrong, please correct me. So Dune was like such a turning point in culture when it came to that. It was like, wow, this can be successful, because it is described as the most thrilling, the most famous sci-fi story out there. And then Star Wars came out, and that really revolutionized the film aspect of sci-fi. Dune, I think, revolutionized the story beats and like how the story will progress in a sci-fi movie or thing of culture. But Star Wars really revolutionized the screen aspect of that. If you watch the ILM series, you'll know what I'm talking about on Disney Plus. It's really great, but I believe someone in there said that George Lucas wanted Star Wars to have the speed of Flash Gordon, which is another sci-fi-esque thing, which came out in like the 30s or something, and the effects of 2001: Space Odyssey. And Star Wars really combined that. I think it had the Battle of Yavin is a great example of that. The X-Wings look amazing, the speed, and yeah, so I think Star Wars proved that it could work on screen, and Dune proved that it could work, period, other than, I mean, Star Trek. But to me, like, Star Trek is... Yeah, as a Star Wars fan, you probably know what I'm talking about, but Star Wars, I think, just proved that there is an audience for this outside of 2001. And that's another, like, thing with 2001, like, it's just slow, and it's a very, I think, Earth-based, more than these two series anyway. I don't know much about 2001, but it is definitely closer to a NASA story than anything from Star Wars and Dune. And that's another thing that these two series both have in common, and that it is, they're far away from Earth. Dune has Earth in its universe. Star Wars is not really sure at this point. I saw an article where it's like, yeah, Star Wars is canon, Earth is canon. I don't know, I don't care. But to me, it just, both these series proves that while you can have something in outer space, it doesn't mean that it can't be relatable to the audience. I mean, both of these stories are very relatable stories, like Dune about oppression, and like I said, a religion just absolutely destroying all rationale in anyone's thinking. Meanwhile, Star Wars is about like how political ideologies can take over when nobody thinks about it, and like how it is really, like I said, commentary on fascism. Just look at the visuals of the Empire and you'll see it. But it can just prove that sci-fi can just walk along with Earth, if you know what I'm saying, like real world history and real world problems, even though they're in outer space. And it's a really cool thing that like Star Wars can have a problem of like a dictatorship taking over the galaxy, or Dune can have the problem of religion playing a major role in politics. And yeah, so this was a very... I could talk for a lot longer, I think, but I have to cut myself off here, otherwise I'll just start spewing nonsense that makes sense to me, but nobody else. This video, I really enjoyed making it, and I really, like I said, I enjoy Dune, I enjoy Star Wars. These are both great franchises, and I can't wait for the assumed Dune 3 movie to come out. I have to assume they're making a Dune Messiah, because, I mean, Dune 2 performed so well at the box office, apart from maybe the popcorn bucket debacle. But, yeah, this has been my Dune versus Star Wars comparison. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe if you want to see, more content. I mainly do Star Wars content, so that's why I made this video. And, yeah, I don't know, ring the bell, comment your thoughts on these two series. If YouTube allows comments on this video, it's a real problem, because YouTube just hasn't been allowing comments on a lot of videos with not even my face on it. This is why I wear a mask and all this, like, so you can't see my face, and YouTube just, I guess, doesn't seem to understand that. I think it's probably something to do with the algorithm or whatever. But, yeah, that was a long-winded explanation. It's been the Followers Hangout. Later, nerds.